Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today, and Amber is in the building on Friday as usual. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So tell us what's coming up on Rising.
I will. I absolutely will. All right. Coming up on Rising, former presidential candidate Kamala Harris is revealing who her real first choice for vice president was.
Plus, the CDC has an updated MMRV vaccine schedule, but some experts are sounding the alarm.
And Tucker Carlson is issuing a warning after Charlie Kirk's death, apparently over comments made by Attorney General Pam Bondi. But first, Lindsey, tell us what you're seeing in your lens.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's get to it. President Trump has now turned his focus to Memphis, making it the latest city he says needs federal intervention to fight crime. He signed an order alongside Tennessee's Republican Governor Bill Lee to establish a new task force there. Now, Trump compared it to what he already did in Washington, D.C., where more than 2,000 National Guard troops have been stationed for weeks. Here he is discussing the executive order to push this forward.
Very important because of the crime that's going on, not only in Memphis, in many cities, and we're going to take care of all of them, step by step, just like we did in D.C. We have virtually no crime in D.C. right now.
Now, this new task force doesn't just include the Guard. It ropes in the FBI, immigration authorities, U.S. Marshals, and more. And on paper, it looks like a major crime-fighting coalition. But when you scratch the surface, it's really about testing the limits of presidential power, forcing or threatening federal intervention in Democratic-led cities under the banner of, quote, law and order. And the numbers in Memphis don't justify this kind of escalation. Just days before Trump's announcement, the Memphis Police Department reported declines across every single major crime category compared to the same time period in recent years. Now, Memphis Mayor Paul Young made his position pretty clear.
I want to be clear, I did not ask for the National Guard, and I don't think it's the way to drive down crime.
Now, here's another problem. When the president deploys federal agents for street patrols, it doesn't just disrupt cities, it derails the work those agencies were actually created to do. So in Washington, we're already seeing it. As Trump deployment of federal agent there enters the second month, the effects are becoming clear. While crime keeps falling, the other investigative work on the FBI is being delayed, frustrating law enforcement and leading some people to actually quit. Many agents who were once focused on financial fraud or things like public corruption now spend 2 or 3 nights patrolling the streets. That means critical investigations, things like witness interviews, search warrants, and planning meetings are slowing to a crawl. So not only does this militarized approach put soldiers on American streets, it also takes away from the very investigations that actually keep our government accountable and our community safe. That's why this should concern all of us. We're being conditioned to accept the military as a recurring answer to non-emergency problems. And when you normalize soldiers in the street, you normalize executive overreach. The truth is pretty simple. The military should not be policing civilians. So why are we normalizing it? Why are we so quick to welcome soldiers into U.S. cities as a fix for crime? Because this isn't about safety. It's about government power expanding where it really doesn't belong. If the past few years taught us anything, it's this. Once you normalize the extraordinary, you lose your ability to call it out when it becomes the rule. And when it comes to putting soldiers on our streets, we can't afford to play that game.
All right, so Memphis, apparently the next city Trump's looking to go into. He's also talked about going into St. Louis. Now, I think one of the important differences between those cities and D.C., of course, is that there's a Republican governor who actually welcomes the National Guard coming in. So what is your take on, you know, if the governor says that they want the assistance and he agrees with the president, then is that still overreach?
Well, and that's what I think. What we saw and the difference between specifically in Memphis is that the governor was standing right next to him when he signed the executive order and said, come on. And the mayor's like, no, I don't want to see this. But I really think that for the Republican Party, who is largely hands off of local cities and states and likes autonomy and has been campaigning for that for my full lifetime, to see this rabbit hole or this can of worms opened up where we don't have dialogue with local leaders about how to support them in ways that they've been vocal about, whether Democratic or Republican, said we need more funding for certain programs or more police officers. Like literally it's a numbers thing. And if we're not having conversations about how to solve this long term, sending the National Guard in, like even in DC, we're going to see 30 days where obviously the crime will go down. There's more police on the street, there's more National Guard on the street, but then we're going to see it go back or just plateau. Even the homeless population that was pushed out come back, because what's the long-term strategy? There still needs to be coordination, I believe, and not kind of this strict, like, I'm laying the iron fist down, and President Trump just moves forward with things that, the community is not asking for. There's also a whole layer about community relationships and trust. And so if there's a large community that's saying we're not comfortable with the presence of the National Guard here, then perhaps there's a different way to try to figure out a better solution that doesn't create an unnecessary enemy out of our National Guard.
Well, I am glad to hear you say that apparently Democratic mayors are now asking for more funding for the police, because that was not the case just a few years ago, right? A lot of them were calling for either defunding the police or rerouting police funding to different services. So if they are asking for more police funding now, I think that's good news overall. But really, the problem is not just funding, but also a lack of people who want to be police officers, because there has been an environment created where police officers are really demonized. And in D.C., even as Muriel Bowser rejected calls from the city council to reduce police funding, they still have a shortage of hundreds of officers, which is why the National Guard stepping in is so important. Because speaking to sources on the ground who have seen this firsthand, they talk about how the National Guard's presence has actually freed up the officers who are on the job to be able to focus on really serious issues and serious crime areas like in Southeast or Anacostia, and solve crimes there where previously those issues would have been ignored.
And I think another concern is, because DC is obviously an anomaly, not like any other state, but when we're talking about going after the #1 crime city, my argument from the beginning has been, well, if it's really a national emergency, which DC wasn't even in the top 10, and he's naming Detroit when he was recently in the UK, the president is saying that could be next. He's skipping over several cities in Ohio that are on like the top 5, where he's not even having a conversation, and that governor is Republican and hasn't flat out said he wants troops to come. So if this is really an emergency thing and we're going through top 10, it's almost like he's picking and choosing specific Democratic-led cities to make an example out of them, when he can talk to the governor of Ohio and get some of his cities off that top 10 list. And I just wonder what the strategy is. If it's actually like we're going in order of the top emergency, then fine. In Memphis, have that conversation. The governor has now welcomed you. But otherwise, now the rest of the cities, there's Cleveland, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio. Like, talk to this Republican governor and make it happen. And the Republican governor kind of like is laissez-faire, talk to those mayors. So he's not welcoming, but he's also walking the line saying that this might be a little bit of government overreach without saying it. And so we're kind of seeing that dialogue happen, but not just flat out, because people don't want to go against President Trump, I believe, because they understand that's not, with the base may not settle them and be comfortable for them to continue forward. But couldn't this all be handled, since these are non-emergencies, with dialogue and conversation and collaboration? And I think that those are the key things that are missing from making this a long-term, eventful, and working strategy.
I guess the question, though, is what is the dialogue that's being offered by, let's say, the mayor of Chicago or the mayor of Memphis? What are they asking the Trump administration to do that is reasonably going to bring down crime? And I haven't really seen them throw out any other solutions besides this temporary National Guard assistance. So I think it's fine to have conversations and collaboration, but when you have Mayor Brandon Johnson, for example, saying that he's not going to work with the Trump administration, and he's furious that they're enforcing immigration law, they don't want the National Guard to come in to take on the homicide problem, that just doesn't seem constructive to me.
Right, but then we have a contentious relationship, and we're trying to figure out who to blame first, right? You understand, and we can agree that President Trump has a very direct style and approach of talking to people that doesn't land well with a lot of people. And when you start with force and kind of mention it in D.C. and then have a dialogue with Mayor Muriel Bowser after the fact, then that's what the format has been laid out of what it's going to look like. I'm going to do this, you respond later, oh, it's working, okay, now we talk. When really we could talk first and organize this. And so I think when you don't welcome the conversation on the forefront and expect the mayors to lead presidentially when you're not even doing that, that's a large request when you are where the buck stops for this entire country.
Yeah, I guess I would say that the leadership is just doing it in D.C. because it is the nation's capital. Obviously, they don't have the same rights as a district as cities and states do. So I think the president did lead by choosing to send the National Guard in amidst this massive crime wave. But we obviously agree to disagree on that one. Up next on Rising, Tucker Carlson has a warning for the nation following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We'll be right back. Tucker Carlson gave a seemingly pointed call out to Attorney General Pam Bondi during an episode of his show this week. Bondi is finding herself in hot water over comments she made after Charlie Kirk's death related to hate speech.
This is the Attorney General of the United States, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, telling you that there is this other category called hate speech. And of course, the implication is that's a crime. There's almost no sentence that Charlie Kirk, and I'm not running the risk of appropriating his memory for my own ends by saying this, it's provable. There's no sentence that Charlie Kirk would have objected to more than that.
Here's a bit more of what Tucker had to say.
You hope that. You hope that Charlie Kirk's death won't be used by a group we now call bad actors to create a society that was the opposite of the one he worked to build. You hope that. You hope that a year from now, the turmoil we're seeing in the aftermath of his murder won't be leveraged to bring hate speech laws to this country. And trust me, if it is, if that does happen, there is never a more justified moment for civil disobedience than that, ever, and there never will be.
Now, in case you forgot, here's where the trouble started for Bondi earlier this week.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Bondi later clarified her comments, saying that, quote, hate speech that crosses the line into threats of violence is not protected by the First Amendment. It's a crime. For far too long, we've watched the radical left normalize threats, call for assassinations, and cheer on political violence. That era is over.
Meanwhile, the organization founded by Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, has unanimously elected his wife, Erica Kirk, as their new CEO, just over a week following her husband's passing. Turning Point said in a statement on Thursday, quote, it was the honor of our lives to serve as board members at Charlie's side. Charlie prepared all of us for a moment like this one. He worked tirelessly to ensure Turning Point USA was built to survive even the greatest tests. And now it's our great pride to announce Erica Kirk as the new CEO and chair of the board for Turning Point USA. So I think that it was a unanimous choice, but an obvious choice to put her in that position. I'm not like deeply rooted in understanding and being familiar with the inner workings of Turning Point, but I think that likely what it seems to me is that she would be in that position in like an oversight role for a long time. But I'm wondering, like, as a mom and as somebody who has, a lot on her plate with dealing with devastation at this level, if they'll actually want her to be leading this organization for the next 10 years, let's say, or will she be like in a chairman or chairwoman type of position? And maybe you can give some more insight on what you think the longevity of it will be.
Yeah, I'm not sure, obviously, exactly what the specifics of her role will be, but I think given her speech last week so quickly after the death of her husband, and being able to talk to the public and provide them with some hope and also some strength in a really difficult time, particularly for the conservative movement, showed, I think, just how much strength that she has, and suggests that she does have the ability to do this, even with having those two kids, raising them in the absence of their father. So I think it was a smart choice for them. Charlie apparently also told people at Turning Point that in the event of his death, which is crazy that he was even
I know, I'm like, why is a 31-year-old thinking of that?
Well, he received so many threats all the time, to the point that he had this private security. So unfortunately, it was something that he obviously was keenly aware of in terms of the possibility of an assassination happening. So he had told people at Turning Point that if he were to pass, he wanted Erica to lead the organization. Since his passing, they've had 50,000 plus chapter requests from high school, college, and even homeschool students who want to start their own Turning Point chapter. They've raised a ton of money. So I think it bodes well for the future of the organization as well as Charlie's legacy.
Now we have to talk about Tucker Carlson,
yes,
and Bondi. There's some infighting within the Republican Party, I guess, right now. Pam Bondi tried to clarify some of her statements. But I do think that, I saw all sides of the aisle kind of coming at Pam Bondi. My first perspective is I just think I'm confused about the selective outrage happening right now, because when you're thinking about the party as a whole, Elon Musk in 2023, remember people were getting canceled for like tweeting things or saying things. He actually wrote, if you're unfairly treated by your employer due to posting or liking something on my platform, let me fund your legal bill. No limit. He wants to just get you. So that was one thought. And then President Trump on Inauguration Day, and I want to get it exactly right, said, quote, after years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I'm also going to sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. To which Republicans applauded, everyone in the room pretty much. I didn't see somebody not applauding. I think everyone agrees with free speech, whether in practice it happens that way when you're a Democrat and Republican. I think most people applauded for that moment. So I'm just confused about how that seems like it's starting to change within the party when censorship was completely demonized and cancel culture was demonized by the Republican Party intentionally and rightfully in many of the cases, I think, how we got here.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think there is an important distinction to be made between cancel culture and what is happening now, which is actually consequences for really dehumanizing evil behavior. Celebrating an assassination is evil, right? That's a moral virtue, a moral standard that I think we all could agree on. And the idea that there are teachers who are in charge of educating our children, people who work in hospitals who are supposed to have empathy for patients regardless of their political orientation, online saying that it was a good thing that Charlie died or that he deserved it in some way. Sorry, but those people shouldn't be employed in those positions. And I think that's something that probably most Americans agree on. When we talk about cancel culture, the fundamental difference is that the punishments did not fit the crime. So when you're digging up decade-old tweets, when you are taking what are mainstream conservative positions and telling people that they don't deserve to be employed because of those, that's a really fundamentally different thing than saying it's actually just morally wrong and you're a bad person and evil and shouldn't work for my company if you celebrate an assassination. So I don't view those as comparable in any way. Now, all of that being said, Pam Bondi's comments, I think, are ridiculous, and the reason why you saw so many Republicans and conservatives speak out against them is that we do not believe that there is a distinction between free speech and hate speech. Hate speech is protected under the Constitution, and her talking about threats of violence or incitement of violence is not hate speech. That's just threats of violence. It's an entirely separate category. And one of the reasons why conservatives came to this position or feel it so strongly is because so many of our opinions, which are very mainstream, agreed upon by a large portion of the American people, were classified as hate speech, specifically on college campuses, for the purpose of not allowing our speakers to appear on campus or to justify protest or threats of violence against them. So for her to put her foot in her mouth this way was hugely unhelpful, and I think does, unfortunately, give credence to the idea that Republicans are engaging in censorship when really what they're saying is that people who celebrate murder probably shouldn't have jobs.
Certainly, and that's why I think, we can agree there, but I do think that, if we're going to start with Charlie Kirk, this should be the standard, and there shouldn't be any double standards here. So we should just comb through the histories of everyone who celebrated murder in our country for many things, like Trayvon Martin, who had Skittles in his hand, and people celebrated that murder or were propping up.
Who celebrated that?
It's plenty of people. I can show you on my Twitter timeline in my comments being negative. I mean, Twitter's nasty. Social media is nasty.
Yeah.
So don't say who, because there's not Democratic leaders that actually celebrated Charlie Kirk being killed. There's not one that I found. And so that's the distinction between people online being trolls. I can show you any troll for any topic, obviously, because people hide behind avatars.
But these people aren't anonymous trolls, though. I mean, these people are putting it on their Facebook accounts, on their Instagram.
They're people, though. They're not politicians. I haven't found one politician celebrating Charlie Kirk's death and praising his assassination. So that's what I mean. We're trying to manage all these people to lose their jobs. We have to make sure that we're starting with every single incident and not just Charlie Kirk.
Okay. All right. Next up, a CDC panel just voted to change vaccine recommendations for the MMRV shot.
Why some critics are expressing concern. Don't go anywhere.
The CDC's Vaccine Advisory Panel has voted to push back the recommendation for what is called the MMRV vaccine to 4 years old.
Now, MMRV stands for measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella, which is chickenpox. The panel voted 8-3 that MMRV should not be recommended for children younger than 4.
In another motion, the panel voted that children under 4 can still get the MMRV shot under the Vaccines for Children federal program. 12 months is typically the age where children get the MMRV shot. The chair of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, Martin Koldorf, said at the start of the meeting, quote, "We are currently experiencing heated controversies about vaccines, and a key question is, who can you trust? Here's my advice. When there are different scientific views, only trust scientists who are willing to engage with and publicly debate the scientists with other views." The main argument for raising the age seemed to be over the increased risk of febrile seizures linked to the vaccines. While they are common and for the most part don't cause long-term effects, panel members said that the seizures can be traumatic for parents, I would think so, and that raising the age lowers the risk.
Now, other experts expressed concern, however. President of the American College of Physicians, Jason Goldman, said, quote, "When you make this recommendation, you now give license to insurance companies and the Vaccine for Children program not to cover this vaccine. And finally, you're taking away the choice of parents to have informed consent and discussion with their physician on what they want to do for the health and benefit of their children." Cody Messner, one of the panelists who voted no, said that the vaccine rates would drop as a result.
All right, so I think it is important to clarify what exactly the guidance is, which is that previously the MMRV, or the combined shot for chickenpox, measles, mumps, and rubella, was recommended for children under the age of 4. However, according to DCNF, Daily Caller News Foundation investigative reporter Emily Kopp, 85% of parents already opted to separate the shots. So basically the guidance is now that if your child is under 4, if you want to give this to an infant, then you would give them the MMR and the chickenpox separately as opposed to the combined shot. So really it's not recommending that children don't get it, but it's saying that they should do the separate shots because of the increased risk for fevers and febrile seizures from the combined shot for children under 4. So I think it's being really hyped up as this massive change when really it's what most parents were doing anyway.
I think when you watch this week on Capitol Hill, Susan Monterez, who was the 29-day director of the CDC there, completely disagree with everything that RFK said. We can't even figure out why she left the organization because we're hearing two totally different stories. The overall confusion and chaos that I'm seeing come out, I guess starting from the top with RFK, is concerning because as a parent and as somebody, an American who just wants to understand what we should do, get the right guidance, and coming off the heels of COVID where people already are critical of the CDC, I think, we're sowing in this mainstay of distrust within organizations that are supposed to guide us and tell us just exactly what we should be doing. And more parents, like several studies have shown that more parents are opting out of the vaccine, and not in a way that, it's optional, in a way that they're saying religious reasons, citing other things like that, or health reasons why their kid can't get these vaccines. And then we saw 2 cases of kids dying because they weren't vaccinated, school-age kids in Texas just this year, of measles, something that was largely eradicated. So I think first comes confusion, and then parents trying to make their best independent choices, which I totally support, but I think it has to come from science and information. And that seemed to be the main concern of Susan Monterez on Capitol Hill this week. And so as a parent and as an American who is trying to follow guidelines of supposed to be our top trusted experts, this is just, to me, a scary time to be in, where we're getting confusing messages constantly.
I agree that COVID was obviously a really difficult time in terms of public trust and that public health bureaucracy because of how many mistakes were made. And that's why it's so important for RFK to get this right and to make sure that the right people are in to restore public trust. And in regards to the measles vaccine, again, I think it is really important to note that I actually think it was the media coverage that gave people the wrong impression about what exactly was happening here. All of the headlines suggested that he was just not recommending the shot for children under 4 at all, when the reality was he was recommending that they separate out the shots to reduce that risk of febrile seizures, which to me seems entirely responsible and actually in response to the science, right? They studied this. They found that there was this massive increased risk. If you look at the charts, the spike is quite insane, and said, okay, well, there's a way we can make sure that children are prevented from getting measles, mumps, and rubella and chickenpox, but in a way that makes sure that they don't have these massive side effects too.
Yeah, now school's in effect. We're going to be talking about this endlessly, I'm sure, for the school year.
Up next, former Vice President Kamala Harris has revealed who would have been her first pick to be her running mate in 2024, and it wasn't Governor Tim Walz. Stick around. Former Vice President Kamala Harris's upcoming memoir continues to draw headlines. Last week, an excerpt from the book revealed that Harris thought it was reckless for Joe Biden to run for re-election.
Now the Democratic nominee is reflecting on her choice for her running mate. Per an excerpt from The Atlantic, Harris says former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg was her first choice for vice president, but that picking a gay man was too risky. She writes that Buttigieg, quote, would have been an ideal partner if I were a straight white man, but we were already asking a lot of America to accept a woman, a black woman married to a Jewish man, knowing what was at stake It was too big of a risk. And I think Pete also knew that, to our mutual sadness.
Harris ultimately picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. The short list of other candidates included Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. When asked about the excerpt, Buttigieg had this response.
Well, I was surprised when I read that. I just believe in giving Americans more credit than that. My experience in politics has been that the way that you earn trust with voters is based mostly on what they think you're going to do for their lives, not on categories. And I wouldn't have run for president if I didn't believe that.
A separate excerpt published by the New York Times goes into more detail on Harris's relationship with Joe Biden. She claims that minutes before her debate with Trump in September 2024, she received a phone call from Joe Biden.
The former president relayed that his brother told him that Harris was bad-mouthing him, and that several power brokers, you saw my face, I wasn't aware, I didn't read that far into the New York Times article, he was threatening not to support her as a result. Harris writes, quote, "I just couldn't understand why he would call me right now and make it all about himself, distracting me with worry about hostile power brokers in the biggest city of the most important swing state."
All right, well, we have to start with that because...
Yeah, I knew we were talking about Buttigieg, and I didn't read that New York Times article. I'm sorry, y'all, but I am like also finding out this news with you.
I read this yesterday,
whoa.
And it was the subject of a lot of office scuttlebutt because it was so insane, but also kind of hilarious that Joe Biden, like minutes before this disastrous debate, is calling up Kamala and being like, "I heard you were talking.
You said this about me?
What's going on?"
Oh my gosh. Okay,
this is one of a kind.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting about this? I have been on record saying that this whole situation was a disaster, that Biden shouldn't run again, that he should have dropped out even when he made the choice, even before the disastrous debate, that Kamala had already tried to primary, that didn't work. She needed a full campaign at the very least in order to win this thing. So I was disappointed in the way that everything played out. But I think what's most frustrating for me right now with this book, with Kamala, with Karine Jean-Pierre, with Jake Tapper, who hadn't said anything but then wrote this tell-all, is everyone's just like piling on Biden right now when there was a key moment where the person that you were describing as the worst of all times kind of leader, President Trump, to come back in office again would bring this nation to its demise, basically. This was the kind of dialogue that we were telling Americans, that this can't happen. And so to have the plan of just sit back and not, let's say, disrespect Jill Biden because she thought he should push forward is completely unacceptable to me. Like, how did we, everything that's being said now should have been said then. Like, it wasn't the time to sit back and, if democracy was at stake, then this should not have there's no tell-all time. Everything that you said should have been said prior to that. But
you're right.
Yeah, we can talk about this first and then go to Buttigieg. Go ahead. What do you?
No, I think you're exactly right. It really does call into question, like, one, did they really believe Trump was this threat that they painted him out to be, or was this just political sort of power brokering? And why were Joe and Jill seemingly so untouchable that no one could say anything to them? And I think it's because, and this is just my theory, I think that the staff around Biden really enjoyed the independence and power that they were able to grab because he was not really fit for the job. And they didn't want to give that up to someone who was mentally or physically capable of being president, because then they would no longer be the ones making the decisions.
It's like when you have a lenient boss and nothing gets done. That sounds like that. Like, oh, nobody checks on my work.
Exactly.
Well, that's insane. And Joe Biden, it seems like, and even when I saw that interview after that terrible debate, when he doubled down and was like, only if God, and I'm paraphrasing, strikes down will I get out. And I'm like, this is the ego.
He's a funny guy. I have to say.
That ego is insane. Like, we were like, we watched that debate. You were part of that. You watched that back and said, only if God strikes you down. Like, it's just confusing. But I don't want to run out of time, and I do want to talk about Buttigieg.
Yes.
So Buttigieg is a guy, he responded to this right away. He's a go anywhere, ask anything type of person, which I really love. I think even Republicans appreciate that he will come on their platforms and just have the dialogue. He has a lot going for him about why he could have been a potential VP. I mean, after COVID, nobody was traveling. Airlines were starting to feel like they were going bankrupt. He rehabilitated the travel industry and started, working really hard in his role there as transportation secretary. So he is fully equipped for the job. But I think even if you and I sit here today and say, okay, we have tons of dialogue with people of all different races, backgrounds, creeds, and sexualities, that's fine. And we're a progressive country in that state. But realistically, when I think about what people do when they close the voting booth and it's just them and their decision, we have to be honest that there are people who still look at race, people who still look at sex as reasons why they do or don't do things. It could be based on their religion. It could be, having racist thoughts. It could be, just the way that they grew up, what they see as presidential. I mean, I've sat with a woman in Texas who just said, I just don't think a woman should be president. That was just a statement. And I was blown away as a woman, talking to a woman, telling me that was the bottom line. And so I just think in terms of where we are versus where we say we are versus where we are, I mean, the Supreme Court is currently reviewing same-sex marriage all over again because that was brought to the table.
Well,
so
they're not taking up any of those cases, but
they're being pushed to their Supreme Court. People are actually trying to bring this back to the forefront, right? And appeal a ruling that's been in situated for a decade. I mean, women are still paid. They were paid 84% or 84 cents on the dollar to 81. I mean, but that is literally happening. So if you go to an employer and they're accepting that you and I do the same role and you're a man and we do the same exact role with the same credentials and then you get $1 and I get 81 cents, it's unacceptable.
Okay, I would love to debate that because it's wrong, but I want to talk about.
You want to make sure we stay on. Okay,
yes,
we'll talk about that another time. Okay,
we'll have a wage gap debate another time. But on the Buttigieg point, first of all, I mean, we obviously disagree on his time as transportation secretary. I thought it was horrific. And actually, I think the vaccine mandates on pilots and flight attendants really crippled the airline industry, which we are continuing to see the knock-on effects of from this day to this day. But I actually appreciated his response to Kamala's book. I thought it was pretty pitch perfect, which is like, I give the American people credit. I want to present my record to them, and I was really shocked by what Kamala said, and I think that was actually the right way to approach this, as opposed to sort of starting with this presumption that the American people are bigoted or homophobic. One thing I did want to ask you, because I was kind of thinking about this in terms of the Democratic base, which is obviously black voters are a huge voting bloc for the Democratic Party, and Kamala performed worse among black voters than Joe Biden did in the polls leading up to the November election. But even worse than her was Buttigieg. So do you think that was something that she was maybe considering as she was looking at her running mate?
Well, I think there was an overall disconnect, which I said, again, I was very vocal on about where the Democratic Party was. When you talk about that support, it's overwhelming for black women. And then for black men, a little bit less so, but still large majority by far. And I think when you talk about people that since the civil rights movement have been largely connected in unison with a party that hasn't met them with the same level of support in as far as things that they want to get pushed forward not actually happening,
taking them for granted.
Yeah, taking them for granted, then you have people that are frustrated. And it's like, well, why would I vote? And then you have President Trump talking about the economy, and it was just a fact that you saw people slide over and say, I want more money. I saw a check come in my account when President Trump was president that was signed with his name. I need more money. This economy is terrible. And people were voting based on their pocketbooks and wallets. All
right, fair enough. An immigration judge has ordered Mahmoud Khalil to be deported. Stay with us.
An immigration judge has ordered that Mahmoud Khalil, the face of Columbia University's pro-Palestinian protest last year, be deported. You may remember Khalil was detained back in March by federal authorities, who alleged that his presence was a threat to U.S. foreign policy. Now, Khalil was kept in a Louisiana detention facility for more than 3 months before he was released.
Now, despite being released from immigration enforcement custody, a judge ordered late last week that Khalil be removed from the U.S. for not disclosing certain information on his green card application. The judge's order reads in part, the respondent understood the consequences and that the candid disclosure of his affiliations might lead to an additional line of questioning and the ultimate denial of his application for conditional permanent residency. The respondent willfully misrepresented material facts for the sole purpose of circumventing the immigration process and reducing the likelihood his application would be denied. In response to the order, DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin called it a privilege to be granted a visa or green card, saying in a statement to The Hill, "When you advocate for violence, glorify and support terrorists that relish the killing of Americans and harass Jews, take over buildings and deface property, that privilege should be revoked, and you should not be in this country."
But Khalil is fighting back, slamming the Trump administration in a statement of his own. He writes, quote, "It is no surprise that the Trump administration continues to retaliate against me for my exercise of free speech. Their latest attempt through a kangaroo immigration court exposes their true colors once again. Khalil could be deported to either Algeria or Syria. His legal team says they have 30 days to challenge the ruling, indicating that they would appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals.
All right, so Syria or Algeria, because he was born in Syria
yeah.
and is a citizen of Algeria. I guess I'm not super surprised by this. I know people kind of took up Mahmoud Khalil as this shining example of free speech, but there were a lot of issues with his immigration case. I mean, the most obvious is that when the State Department is calling you a threat to U.S. foreign policy and you are on camera justifying the October 7th terror attacks that resulted in Americans being taken hostage, then you are absolutely a threat to U.S. foreign policy. But I think the bigger issue here is the misrepresentations on his green card application. Just a list of some of the things that he did not mention when applying for a green card was working at the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, at the UN Relief and Works Agency, being a member of an anti-Israel group at Columbia University called Apartheid Divest, which was responsible for those illegal encampments. And he also worked in Beirut in Syria's office in the British Embassy. So even regardless of what you think about those groups, leaving them off of your green card application seemed obviously intended to stymie the process of actually talking about his connections to these individuals, these groups, and his feelings about foreign policy and the potential for him to cause unrest in the United States. So when you refuse to list affiliations on your green card application, I think it should be a no-brainer that you have to go.
Yeah, I think to me, when I look at this, there's obviously a political retaliation happening. I mean, he was this vocal critic of how the war was playing out between Hamas and Israel, and he was just very forward in using colleges, which are known as places to share ideas, rebuke things that are going on around the world and be vocal about that. That's what colleges are created for. And there's no actual proof that he supported any designated terror group. So I think when we talk about that and talk about how he's protesting, he didn't say we need to continue to fund Hamas. He said this is not right. He's telling people why he doesn't think that Israel attacking Hamas in the way it is appropriate to keep moving forward. I mean, the UN is saying this now. So how is he actually attached to a terror group? And I think that, when immigration courts particularly point someone out who we know was demonstrating their free speech on a campus and then find anything, like if you're already on somebody's radar and then they look for anything to get you out of there, like that's a real thing that happens in political retribution or in retribution in life. And I think that we need to make sure that we're not setting a precedent that people are just, and mind you, he should fill out the application correctly. That's just the standard. But we should not set a precedent that you become or you have a target on your back simply because you protested at a college. And so now we open up the can of worms to figure out how to deport you. I don't think that is a good precedent to set in the United States. That's not the foundation that we were built on.
So I'll just start with the point that it wasn't just a protest, but actually breaking the law in taking over public spaces and fomenting threats of violence against Jewish people on campus and preventing their free movement, which is a violation of the Civil Rights Act. But beyond that, you asked, how is he connected to Hamas or how is he supporting Hamas? In several news interviews, he repeatedly refused to condemn Hamas. And in a separate news interview with Ezra Klein, when he was talking about the October 7th terror attacks, he said effectively, and he did use the word we, but I'll paraphrase the rest, we had no choice but to carry it out this way, which is very bizarre phrasing if you don't see yourself as connected to Hamas in some way. He also, again, was involved in this group that was distributing flyers that were in support of Hamas and October 7th. So I think it's pretty undeniable that he was aligning himself with terrorist groups.
Well, like he said, he has 30 days or his team has 30 days to try to appeal this and see if the willful intent matches what he's being accused of. And I just believe that, as somebody who looks at colleges as a place where we grow ideas, we debate topics, it gets contentious. We obviously never want to.
Tense isn't a debate, right? That's not a debate.
Well, people occupy spaces. I mean, Rosa Parks sat on a bus. You're not supposed to sit there technically according to the law, right? But at the time, maybe what was happening was wrong. And so all I'm saying is that there are ways that people protest by going in spaces that they're not supposed to be, to draw attention, to draw conversation. And that's something that we should champion, especially if we're now having the same conversation that perhaps there are criticisms that we can make that are valid of Benjamin Netanyahu. And it doesn't condemn people as being anti-Semitic because they're having these dialogue. That's what colleges are for. They're daring to have the conversations that we as Americans sometimes shy away from because we're trying to be too politically correct. And so, yes, he should fill out the application properly. And if he needs to get deported because he didn't, that's the consequences of your actions. However, I do believe that if he's being attacked simply because he protested and disagreed with an idea or an entire war, then that should be something that we accept, especially on college campuses, which are the beacon of free speech, which teach us and build the next leaders to continue to use the free speech to change the world in America.
I just view it not as a reaction to his speech, but to his actions. Because again, putting up a tent isn't speech. I mean, civil disobedience, maybe, breaking the law with the intention of bringing attention to a cause, but it's not speech, it's an action. So what we're really not talking about his free speech rights being violated, but him being involved in something that was breaking the law. And I think when you are on a green card, you should be held to a higher standard because, as the DHS spokesperson said, it is a privilege to be able to immigrate to the United States on a legal visa.
Yeah, I just think about what are the next steps, depending on what people are protesting or depending on what spaces they're occupying.
Well,
when will we say that, it has to open a little bit of Pandora's box to say, okay, the issues that are most endearing to whomever is president, let's target those migrants who came over here on visas.
Well, so the line is pretty clear for me. If it's just someone criticizing Israel or using their speech to criticize any type of policy, then no, I don't think they should be targeted for that. But if someone deliberately breaks the law in service of causing unrest or protest in the United States when they're from a foreign country for the purpose of benefiting another foreign country, then that's where the line ends for me. For example, if someone decided that they wanted to lay down in the middle of a highway to protest some U.S. policy and I found out they were on a green card, they should be deported.
Yeah, we're going to keep talking about this, obviously, especially in the next 30 days. So I think there's going to be a lot more here. And the ACLU has already lawsuits filed, so we'll be seeing what happens with those.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how his appeal goes. All right, coming up, some Starbucks employees are suing the company over its new dress code. We'll be right back after this. French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte are both set to give evidence in a U.S. court to prove that the French First Lady is, in fact, a woman.
This all started when the French First Family sued conservative commentator Candace Owens back in July for repeatedly alleging Brigitte was born a man. Here's Owens' response to the suit back then.
Frankly, I find this all to be irresistible and delicious. My lawyer being able to sit across and ask Brigitte Macron questions about her penis. Brigitte would then be compelled for the first time to answer them under oath, revolting against the perverts that run the world. And I want to be very clear here. I count you among them. I think you're sick. I think you're disgusting. And I am fully prepared to take on this battle.
Well, Owens may get her wish. According to the Macron's attorney, there will be, quote, expert testimony that will come out that will be scientific in nature. He went on to say that the couple is ready to demonstrate both generically and specifically that the allegations are false. Their attorney didn't elaborate exactly on what that would look like beyond pictures of Brigitte when she was pregnant with her kids. Well, that would be pretty good evidence, I would think. At first, when people found out that there was going to be scientific and photographic evidence offered, I was like, I think if I were on the jury, I might have to call in sick that day.
This is so weird.
It's so weird.
This is so weird. I literally had to ask our producer, Louis, can you break down why Candace is so obsessed with this? I mean, there's like so much going on to be like meat and potatoes for conversations regarding conservative commentators right now. Brigitte Macron and whether she's a man and prove it. And the fact that, I don't know. You don't have to go high as a president, as President Trump has so graciously shown us. But you don't have to stoop down and answer any podcaster about whether or not your gender is male or female.
No, but they wanna make her hurt, right? Like they want to make her pay the lawyer's fees. They want her to get held in contempt.
Oh, that's what you think this is about, just to make Candace Owens suffer through all this. Got
absolutely.
it. Okay.
They want to punish her.
Because I'm like, why? What does it benefit you?
Yeah, they want to punish her for making these accusations. They want to present the evidence, not only put the issue to bed for all the conspiracy theorists, but most importantly, I think they really want Candace to have to go through this humiliation ritual. if and when it proves out that she was lying about Brigitte Macron's gender. And plus, I think this is all a distraction from the fact that the real issue people should have with Brigitte Macron is that she was Emmanuel's teacher, right? And allegedly groomed him when he was a young boy, and now they're married, and it's really strange. And the age gap isn't so strange at the age they are now, but when you consider how they met, it is very concerning.
Let me tell you something. I had plenty of teachers. Mr. Thomas, Miss whomever. If I see you from now, I could be 60 years old. You're still Mr. Thomas. I'm not gonna holler at you. This just we're not like we're done with that. Like you were my teacher. You always are my teachers,
Yes.
single or not in a relationship. Like that is the weirdest thing in the
It
world.
would be like dating your parents' friend.
Right. It's just that to me. There's just and I know once you're
Gross.
older, everything is just like you're adults. But it's still always gonna be weird to me. I just think if Candace Owens, and mind you, correct me if I'm wrong, everybody out there following it super closely, but just present the evidence that she's a man in full. Like break it down and just tell us why we should believe you. And you have pictures. You have photos? Do you have scientifically proven evidence, Candace? Because if you do, just put it out there. We can put this to bed. And like, why does it have to go to court? She's like so obsessed with this that I'm like, just show what you know. Just share every single piece of detail so we can really be done. Because I haven't seen any concrete evidence, and then now she's getting taken to court, and this is all like, why do I need to know this about this woman? Because either way, if her husband wants to be with her, then what are we talking about? Like, what does it matter? They're both adults that are consenting. Like, so why is this relevant to anyone? I mean, I know she's trying to tie it to a larger issue of like, I don't know, like this weird people in power with sexual weird fetishes or something. Elite,
sexual
yes.
deviant cabals or something.
Yes. And I just think that, as somebody who has seen the recent video on aliens and do believe we have friends out there.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I'm on board with you.
Yes.
That this is just random. And even for me, this is like, come on, man. Look, okay, this could just be a lady.
I think it's annoying because what often happens is that, and I think this is less the case recently, like in the past 6 months to a year or so, but previously Candace would pop off and say something kind of crazy, and then she was lumped in with the entire conservative movement. And it's like, well, this is what your person is saying. But now she's so independent and not affiliated with anyone that I don't think that happens quite as frequently. But it's just, to have to even talk about this is obnoxious. The evidence that she has presented is basically like sources who've seen her, Brigitte Macron without pants on, and like people who were doctors of hers allegedly, who obviously she hasn't revealed who those people are. So they could be anybody.
Yeah, I hate
and then also,
unnamed source.
And then also there's like pictures of a child that looks like a boy when they're young, and they're like allegedly that's Brigitte, and she's like hiding her yearbook photos. I don't know. It's all very like tenuous and vague, and there's not much specific detail, which is why people are like, what are you doing?
So earlier this week, I was talking to Robbie, and I found out that he is not a fan of Candace Owens, which I didn't know. I just didn't know. I wasn't surprised or anything. I was just like, oh, okay, I didn't know. I wanted to know your thoughts, and then also what the breakaway was. Like, what was it because she started people saying being too harsh towards Israel during this war? What was the big breakaway that made it seem like Candace Owens is all of a sudden not part of the MAGA movement or conservative party?
Well, for me, it started back in 2017 or 2018. Her team actually approached me to write a story about claims that BuzzFeed News employees were threatening her former employees of a website called Social Autopsy, where she was basically creating like a database of people who had engaged in alleged hate speech. This was before she became a conservative. This was when she still identified as part of the left. I was able to review the communications from the BuzzFeed reporters, and like, I'm not a BuzzFeed news defender, but I was just doing basic due diligence. Yeah. And the emails were not threatening at all. They were just standard requests for comment. So I went back to Candace and her team, and I was like, can I maybe talk to the people who said that they were threatened? And she said, well, no, because they were under 18 when the threatening happened. I'm I'm like, but they're not under 18 now, so there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to talk to me. And she just was like very resistant to the idea, wouldn't offer me any evidence that these people had been threatened, and I can't run on hearsay.
Right.
So I published a story with the request for comment from BuzzFeed News, and she was livid that I did the story and like followed whatever evidence I could. And so at that point, I had suspicions that she was not maybe the most honest person. And over time, I think people who worked with her started to see the sort of erratic behavior, the manipulation of facts and the truth. And then eventually when she split from Turning Point and the Daily Wire and went to do her own independent show, when she was not sort of reined in from, editors and things like that, it started to kind of go off the rails in terms of claims that she was making. And like, I don't think that it's really about the Israel stuff, because we've seen plenty of right-wing commentators take a similar tact on that as she has. I mean, Tucker Carlson is a great example.
I was going to say Tucker Carlson.
But it's more just like the general, I think, willingness to kind of stretch things to places that she doesn't really have facts to back up.
Got it. So it's feeling kind of performative. I actually just, so a lot of times, like when stuff gets outrageous, I just pay little attention. I just try to get to the, like, what's the actual story. And so I haven't asked a lot of my conservative friends, like, what they feel now. I know maybe their feelings 4 or 5 years ago, but now I'm like, it's just kind of like, I don't know. Robbie always says that people sometimes are like this blended, like you have this one, and even like the conversations we're having, somebody has like this one far right idea and now one far left. And it's like the people who voted for Bernie Sanders, let's say like Joe Rogan, will also support someone like Trump. And it's kind of like
horseshoe theory.
Yeah, a lot of people are like moved off. So I was trying to figure out where to place her, what to do. Like
I don't even know where to place her.
Okay, so it's just, and because this Macron story really threw me off, to bring us full circle, we just she just feels all over the place. And I just wish she would just focus on something else, because there's a lot to talk about in this country. We'll have more for you guys after this. Not this story again.
Some Starbucks employees are fed up and have decided to sue the company over its new dress code.
Now, workers in 3 states are alleging that Starbucks broke the law when it changed its dress code and refused to reimburse new clothes purchases.
The union organizing Starbucks workers is backing the employees who filed class action lawsuits in Illinois, Colorado, and filed complaints with California's Labor and Workforce Development Agency. Starbucks didn't comment on the lawsuits directly, but said on Wednesday that they wanted to simplify things and give clearer guidance. They added, as part of this change and to ensure our partners were prepared, partners received 2 shirts at no cost. That's nice.
Yeah, that is nice. California Starbucks employee and full-time student Brooke Allen said that a manager told her in July that the Crocs she was wearing weren't compliant with the new dress code. As a result, Allen had to spend $60 for a new pair. And she says she almost spent $90 for additional work clothes. Now, Allen said, quote, "I think it's extremely tone deaf on the company's part to expect their employees to completely redesign their wardrobe without any compensation. A lot of us are already living paycheck to paycheck." Now, let's take a look at the new dress code. The new dress code doesn't allow face tattoos, more than 1 facial piercing, and theatrical makeup. It also demands employees wear khaki, black, or blue denim pants with no patterns. Solid black dresses are also allowed if they're not more than 4 inches above the knee, and socks and hosiery must be subdued. Allen says that she misses how the old code allowed her to express herself, and, quote, "It looks sad that everyone is wearing black."
Gosh, yeah, no face tattoos. What are we going to do, Lindsey? I mean, if we want to work at Starbucks, we're in trouble.
You know what? I believe that expression is beautiful. People want, I wouldn't choose a face tattoo, but that's fine if that's what you want to do. There's people that I know in my life that have super strict company guidelines, like even that are dated to me, like no facial hair. Like, my partner has facial hair. Like, to me, that's just a normal thing for men now, like bearded men. It's like there's some things that may look outdated to us in the future. I don't know if facial tattoos is going to be that. But at Starbucks, it's like, I think they used to be able to wear, or it was loosely interpreted. So if you had, like, let's say a black checkered shirt underneath your Starbucks collared shirt, some employees are saying that used to be allowed. And now it's like strict black look, I also have a friend that works at Starbucks that I know she fell on hard times in recent years and is building herself back up. And so perhaps there is a instance where the funding was not available to literally go buy $100 worth of whatever workable shoes, because there are like certain shoes that have the grip that you can work in environments like that, pants and shirt. And that's just a unfortunate reality in America. And we want to celebrate people going back to work and getting their job. But if Starbucks is really giving out those shirts and they're enough to get people, hopefully people have pants, maybe they can have a 2-week exemption or something to get people situated, and let people wear their denim instead of just khakis. Like, some people maybe actually can't afford it, and that's a real thing.
I mean, I think there's enough options here that most people would probably have those things in their wardrobe: khakis, denim, or black pants. I mean, you can't tell me these like emo punk people working at Starbucks don't have a pair of black pants, and then they get the 2 shirts from Starbucks, and yeah, you got to buy a pair of shoes. I don't know. I mean, we buy our own work clothes. I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially if Starbucks is giving them those 2 free shirts. But I do actually have a hot take here.
Okay.
And here's my hot take. Okay, so I see Starbucks is watching this cultural shift happen. They're going a little bit more conservative with the dress code. When I go to order a latte, you know what I want, Lindsay? I want the face tattoo. I want the multiple piercings. I want the purple hair, because that's how I know it's going to be a good coffee, is if a weirdo behind the counter is making it. And if I see someone who's buttoned up and maybe they've even got a tie on, you know what? I'm like, I don't trust this person to make my coffee.
Our team member Alex used to work at Starbucks. He said I was not weird and my coffee was good. There's a distinction, though.
I don't know.
I've been
We'll
at
have to
Starbucks,
test it.
and usually Starbucks is like I get the same order every time. It's just like I get it so often because it just is exact and matches exactly what I wanted to taste and what I wanted to enjoy. But the other day, Starbucks in Union Station was not. It was terrible. I don't know who was there.
Did the barista have purple hair?
I ordered online, so I can't say. Now I'm devastated. I got to check what they're looking like. So maybe Starbucks, you need to consider that the more they're able to express themselves, the more they're able to mix up the drink and make it so special.
Hey, I think that's what it is. If there's a place for people with purple hair and bull nose rings and face tattoos, it's got to be a liberal coffee shop. Like, come on, give us
Starbucks.
the goods.
I don't even. This is why now anyway. Like, why right now do we have to do this? Like, just let people because the economy's not great. So just like let people live for a minute, and when it gets back better, then let people buy new pants.
Yeah, I agree.
Now that does it for us, unfortunately. I want to hang out with Amber all day on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen to us on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. We will see you next week.